tell you is that when you look at these pictures and you look at your bulletin and you look at the graphic right here in front, you see that the series is called Access Granted. Because the book of Romans is basically that message that it is by faith in Jesus Christ we are justified and we have access to the Father. So today what we're going to do, we're going to jump into the next section of chapter 1. We went from verses 1 through 5. Today, I just want to read for you, read to you, and if you have a Bible, I need you to follow me on this, beginning on verse number 8. It's not going to be on the screen, so if you need to pull out your Bible, pull out your app on your phone, or whatever you need to do. I'm reading from the NIV. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, and this is why. Verse 8, because your faith is being reported all over the world. I always wonder what you mean by world, because these people, had a concept of the non-world. But anyway, whatever the world is for them, which I think is Rome for them. Verse 9, God, whom I serve with my whole heart in preaching the gospel of His Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you. Verse 10, this is how I remember you. I remember you. Are you guys following this? I remember you in my prayers at all times. And I pray that now at last, by God's will, the way may be open for me to come to you. Implying He's tried to go, hasn't happened yet. Verse 11. I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. Verse 12. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. That is my prayer this morning, that as you guys go through this day on this campus, you are mutually encouraging one another. Look at verse 13. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that I planned many times to come to you, but have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles. Look at verse 14. I am obligated both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish. Verse 15. That is why I am so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are at Rome. And here is where we focus this morning. You are welcome to look at the screen, obviously, at this time, but you can also look at the Bible. If you have a chance to read the book of Romans, verses 16 and 17, which we're going to focus today, this is the main core message of this gospel. I reminded you last week, and I'm going to say it one more time, this is what is called an occasional letter. It was written for a specific purpose. It was written for a specific reason. Paul writes this letter to a specific group of believers, which we said last week is a combination of Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, that they are now making what is called the Church of Jesus in Rome. And Paul basically gives them this central idea. And I don't know if you're able to see the red within the black font on the screen. But here's where we're going for the next few minutes. Here's what he says coming into this thankful or gratitude or thanksgiving introduction. He says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. And he's going to tell us why he's not ashamed. The reason why he's not ashamed is because it is the gospel that it is where it resides, the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who, what's the word? Who believes. Now, Paul gives you these little parentheses, first to the Jew and then to Gentile. And then here's where I want you to think for a second with me. Because I'm not ashamed of the content of the gospel. That's what he's reminding us, helping us think through. So here's where I want you to think for a second. Again, this is the core of the entire book. Now, obviously this is only week number 2, which implies as you come back for the next 14 weeks, 15 weeks actually, for the next 15 weeks, we're going to dissect this book completely. But I'm going to take you back into these 2 verses over and over again, 16 and 17, because this is the central idea. Please look at me. Here's what it implies from a literary perspective, from the writings of this man. Everything that we're going to say from this point forward, everything that we said last week, hopefully you and I can connect the dots and come back to this central idea. The central idea that Paul is bringing is that he is not ashamed of the content of the gospel. He's not ashamed. What are the implications? Once again, think about the audience. Think about the people that he's writing to. If we have Jews and we have Gentiles, who they have come from Judaism and basically a bunch of other philosophies, and they're coming into this new lifestyle called Christianity, when Paul makes the assertion that he is not ashamed of the gospel, don't you see it, how he's implying that these two groups of the audience, they have been ashamed of the gospel? Now, if you were a Jew or you were a Gentile, which implies Greek philosophy, a lot of views, different views, Judaism, is ingrained, is innate, hundreds of years of legacy. There are two elements that created the shame, this kind of a view of just kind of a shining away from the gospel after being converted. Number one, for Judaism is the concept that this new message, this new Messiah is a Messiah that, according to the book of Isaiah, had to be a suffering Messiah. And for the Jew, that's a problem. Everybody with me on this? It's a problem. If you give me a Messiah, we need him. We just need a Messiah that fits my cultural biases. Does that look like our culture today? Come on, think about it. Most people want Jesus, they just want the Jesus that fits their preconceived ideas. So the Jews are ashamed of this Messiah because he's a suffering servant. Now, when you look at this Greek philosophy, this Gentile generation that are coming to Christianity, they're also ashamed of the gospel. Not for the same reason, but here's the reason why. Because they're finding out that this Messiah that they want is the one who died bodily and physically, died for how many days? 3 days. And on the third day, what happened? Not just spiritually, not just conceptually, not just in imagery or some sort of a figure of speech, but literally, we said this last week, that Jesus was fully man, which implied he died and he came back from the dead. I don't have time to go back into the explanation of resurrection and resuscitation, but all that I'm saying to you is this. The Greek philosophy, the Greek mindset, the Gentile mindset, they did not like the concept of someone coming back from the dead into this world again. Because for them, the supreme experience of life is to divorce the spirit from the physical. So the implication is that you have this Messiah who dies, which implies he loses the spirit like everyone else, right? The soul departs the body, but on the third day, what happened? There's a reconciliation, and that body, physical body, watch this, glorified body, comes back from the dead. Are you tracking on this? So when Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, he's implying those two things, one from the Jews, suffering Messiah, one from the Gentiles. Now, here is what I want to challenge you this morning, and think with me for a second. What do you think will be the application for us this morning? Or let me put it this way. Just like the Jews being ashamed of a suffering Messiah, and the Gentiles being ashamed of a resurrected Messiah, or Christ, what do you think makes us ashamed today? Is there anything that we are shying away from that makes us ashamed of the gospel? I'm going to put it to you very simple. And again, if you're visiting, just enjoy the ride. It gets aggressive sometimes. But this is my chance to introduce the gospel as it is simple. Here's what I want to say to you this morning. You guys ready? By nature, every single soul on the face of the earth hungers justification. Hungers a way to be excused or justified. Because if you're in this place, if you're listening to this, and you still wondering the existence of God, what about world religions? What about Judaism? What about Gnosticism? What about Islam? Okay, we can discuss the differences, but here is the bottom line on any of these discussions. What would you do with guilt? If you don't want to believe in God, be my guest. Don't believe in God. What are you going to do with your guilt? What do I do with my guilt? Because there is no way in heaven you can sit in this place and you can tell me that you don't have any guilt. Oh, come on. Can I talk to your wife? May I introduce myself to your children? I promise you, there is guilt in our lives. What do you do with it? And all that I'm trying to tell you is because the redemption of this guilt can only happen through the atonement of Jesus Christ. If you disregard this Messiah like Jewish people are and Gentiles are doing by being ashamed of it, what I believe we are dealing with right now in our culture, how we are also ashamed, is that by default, please listen to this, by default, we only can choose to deal with our guilt, the worshiping or the justification through Christ alone or through whatever other means you have created. Now, can I just be honest with you? For some of us, that justification, that thing that makes us excused from our wrongdoing and our guilt, for some of us, watch this, is religion. We're so, upright on the things, we're so moral, we're so kind of following all the things that we're supposed to do that we forsake, that at the end of the day, there is nothing you can do to justify yourself until Jesus justifies you. Everybody tracking with me before I get into any more trouble this morning. So all that I'm trying to tell you is this. Stop justifying yourself through whatever means. See, for some of you it's marriage. For some of us it's parenting. Because we really put our children in this pedestal that whenever they, see, it's not if, but when they fail us, we just feel devastated. Some people put their justification in wealth. And then suddenly the economy goes through a recession. And what happens? Everything crumbles down. So all that I'm asking you to do this morning is to think with me about this process of justification, because Paul is saying, do not be ashamed of the gospel. Now here's why we are not ashamed of the gospel. Again, I don't know if you can see the red on that. Because the gospel, this gospel that I'm not ashamed of, is the one, listen, is the one that has the power of God that brings what? Okay, so here's the thing. Once you recognize that by default, if you have not embraced Jesus Christ, you are justifying yourself on something or someone besides Jesus. And that means that you're in trouble. Because whatever you are using as a means of justification for your life, to deal with your guilt, for some of you, it's even just the numbness. You just avoid thinking about guilt. You always put somebody else as the blame responsibility why you are the way you are. If that's the case, and you realize that you have to pull away from that, now you can understand that this is the core of salvation. This is how you are saved. Now, last week, please listen. Last week, I told you, and again, this is not on your notes. You might want to write yourself a note on this. There are 3 things I personally believe you need to be saved from. The first one, first and foremost, is God. When you understand justification, when you understand that you cannot be ashamed of the gospel, you are going to be saved from God. Why am I saying this? Because what you don't want to do is face the wrath, the holiness, the righteousness of God without a mediator. And who's that mediator? Jesus Christ. Please look at me. Hail right now as we speak. Hail right now as we speak. This lake of fire, this eternal torment in the Bible, I believe, is simply imagery. I think the pain and the suffering is unconceivable. And you know why? The reason is because of the presence of God being there without a mediator, Jesus Christ. Hell is nothing else but men facing God without Jesus Christ. You don't want to do that. So that's your first experience of salvation. You're saved from God. Number 2 is saved from hell, obviously. You need to be saved from eternal damnation. Are you okay with that? Okay, you need to be saved from that eternal damnation, which is that presence of God without Jesus. And the last one is you're going to be saved from self. Stop making dumb decisions. Follow Jesus. Here's how we close the thing here for us. So again, not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of salvation. I just explained to you salvation, what that implies. And here's the last one. I don't know if this is, again, you're able to see this, but not only that it is the power of God that brings salvation. Salvation to whom? Salvation to everyone who believes. So in reality, listen, in reality, there is not such a thing as unconditional love. Because even salvation has prerequisites, which is what? You have to believe. You have to repent and you have to believe it. Are you following me on this? So once you understand that either you embrace Jesus as the one who justifies you, otherwise you will find means to justify yourself. I'm going to say that one more time. That's what I say for that few minutes. Unless you see Jesus as the justifier, you're going to find something else to justify yourself. Once you do that, you understand the scope of salvation. That salvation is not simply a prayer you make at age 14, live like hell, and then die and have a Christian funeral. That's not salvation. Salvation is that now you walk into the reality that there is a holy God that deserves and demands your holiness. When that happens, you understand that this experience is literally for everyone. You stop putting labels on people. You stop justifying things because of what people do and who people are. So in reality of your handouts, here's what I want you to understand. This belief system is faith. And saving faith, here's what I want you to think with me for a second. Saving faith is literally in the Bible a continuing faith. And this continuing faith is reflected that quitting and giving up is never an option. Can we talk about this for a second? Do we have a generation of men and women who are we known by our giving up, our quitting, our just whatever happens, happens? See, I'm asking you to think with me what Paul is bringing into the picture, because I believe when he gives this